Welcome to Magnificat TV news program, dedicated to providing news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, June 19, 2024, and these are our news. The Dicastery for Ecumenism has published a document that addresses the possible functions that the papacy will have, including that of honorary primacy. Pope Francis was a guest at the G7 meeting in Italy, where he gave a speech on the ethics and artificial intelligence. The Archbishop of Pretoria, South Africa, has declared that the Pope wants to build a new church with synodality and has expressed his satisfaction with it. The Court of Human Rights of the European Union has rejected euthanasia as one of these human rights and has opted for palliative care. The Pope will be accepted as honorary primate, representing all Christians, according to a document from the Dicastery of Ecumenism.
Cardinal Koch, prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity, released a document entitled The Bishop of Rome, which summarizes the results of the ecumenical dialogue in recent years. The document raises the possibility of the Pope being accepted by the rest of Christian churches as an honorary primate of the representative type. A controversial issue is the Catholic concept of primacy of the Bishop of Rome as an institution of divine right, while most other Christians understand it only as a human right. Hermeneutical clarifications, the document says, have helped to place this traditional dichotomy in a new perspective, considering the primacy of both divine and human right, that is, as part of God's will for the Church and mediated throughout human history. A major obstacle is the dogmatic definitions of the First Vatican Council. Several ecumenical dialogues have made promising progress in undertaking a rereading or re-reception of this council, opening new avenues for a more and precise understanding of its teaching. Also, in the light of the historical context and the teaching of the Second Vatican Council. A first general agreement is the mutual interdependence of primacy and synodality at all levels of the Church, and the consequent need for a synodal exercise of primacy, the Vatican document states. It goes on to emphasize the importance of the principle of subsidiarity. No issue that can be adequately dealt with at lower levels should be raised to a higher level. Some dialogues apply this principle to define an acceptable model of unity in diversity with the Catholic Church, arguing that the power of the Bishop of Rome should not exceed what is necessary. A first proposal is for the new interpretation by the Catholic Church of the teachings of Vatican I, with new expressions and vocabulary, faithful to original intention, but integrated into an ecclesiology of communion and adapted to the present cultural and ecumenical context. A clearer distinction is also proposed between the different responsibilities of the Bishop of Rome, especially between his patriarchal ministry in the Western Church and his primatial ministry of unity in the communion of churches. It also calls for a greater emphasis on the exercise of the Pope's ministry in his particular church, the Diocese of Rome.
The Pope participated in the G7 summit, the major economies of the Western world, and delivered a speech on artificial intelligence.
Addressing the G7 leaders during the session dedicated to artificial intelligence, Pope Francis stressed the profound responsibility that humanity has in managing this powerful tool. He emphasized that AI is a fruit of God's creative potential and highlighted its influence in vital areas such as medicine, education, and politics. Francis noted that AI is present in many aspects of modern life, from medicine and work to culture, communication, and education. He acknowledged that while AI offers the promise of progress, it also raises concerns about its potential negative impact in society. In his address, the Pope emphasized the advent of AI represents a true cognitive industrial revolution, capable of profoundly transforming our social relationships and our very identity as human beings. Pope Francis said that artificial intelligence can facilitate more equitable access to knowledge and significantly advance scientific research. It can also relieve humans from strenuous work tasks. But he also warned of the risks of widening the gap between developed and developing nations. The machine can choose among different options based on algorithms, but only humans can make decisions based on a thorough ethical evaluation, he explained. He insisted that humanity must always ensure meaningful control over the choices made by AI. In this context, the Pope issued an urgent call to reevaluate the development and use of devices such as lethal autonomous weapons, arguing for their prohibition and for greater human control over their operation. No machine should have the power to decide of a lifeless human being, he strongly emphasized. Finally, the Pope called on G7 leaders to promote sound policies that guide the ethical use of AI, ensuring that this technology serves as a common good and promotes social justice.
The Archbishop of Pretoria. The Pope is building a new church with the Lady at the top, and he has expressed his support for this revolutionary change.
Archbishop Mpeko, Archbishop of Pretoria, South Africa, explained that Pope Francis wants to rediscover the nature of the Church for the third millennium, promoting a community of equals where all, lay and clergy, share the same dignity and responsibility. Mpeko noted that the synodal model changes the structures of the Church, reversing the traditional hierarchy to place the laity at the center. The synod and synodality is a call to move from one model of the Church to another, said Archbishop Dabula, who participated in the first session of the ongoing synod. As I have reflected on this clear call from the Holy Father, I have come to realize that what is being called is for a radical change that fundamentally involves moving from one model of the Church to another, he said. Archbishop Mpeko explained that in the second millennium the Church was understood as a hierarchical and clerical institution, with a division between the teaching church composed of the clergy and the receiving church composed of the laity. Archbishop Mpeko said that synodality advocates a bottom-up church. He said that synodality inverts the pyramid and puts the laity at the top, and then puts the hierarchy at the center of that.
In a landmark decision, the European Court of Human Rights has rejected euthanasia as being a human right and called for support for palliative care.
The European Court of Human Rights has ruled in the case of a man who requested euthanasia in Hungary. It reaffirms the absence of a right to assisted suicide and considers palliative care to be essential in order to guarantee a dignified end to life. The ruling states that the provision of physician-assisted dying can have broad social implications and carry risks of error and abuse. The case concerns the hypothetical right asserted by plaintiff Daniel Karsai, who suffers from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, to assistance in dying. Karsai, a prominent human rights lawyer in Budapest, argued unsuccessfully that the criminalization of physician-assisted death violated his rights under Article 8, right to respect for private and family life, and 14, prohibition of discrimination of the European Convention of Human Rights. He defended he had the right to decide when and how to die. The court said that most Council of Europe countries still prohibit both medical assisted suicide and euthanasia. Hungary, therefore, had a wide margin of discretion, and the European Court of Human Rights held that it was not failed to strike fair balance between the interests at stake. The court added that high-quality care, including the use of palliative sedation and effective pain management, was essential to ensure a dignified end of life. Karsai had not alleged that such care was not available.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the Vatican document that raises the possibility of a new role for the functions of the Pope.
The Dicastery for Ecumenical Dialogue for Relations with Other Christian Churches and Ecclesial Communities this week published a document, an interesting document, entitled the Bishop of Rome. The title alone is significant and raises the possibility of reinterpreting the role of the Pope, both as a bishop and in relation to ecclesial communities, as well as in relation to the Catholic Church itself. The first thing to say, and I think it should be made clear at the outset in order to distance ourselves from some very sensationalist media headlines, the first thing to say is that this is not a doctrinal document. It is a summary of the ecumenical dialogue that has taken place over the last few years. So it is a summary of what has been worked on with different commissions, because there is for example, a commission for the Orthodox, another commission for the Armenians, the Copts, another commission for the Lutherans, another commission with the Anglicans. Well, the summary of all that has been discussed is now expressed in this document. It is a document that does not pretend and cannot approve anything new, a reinterpretation in the function of the papacy that would correspond to the doctrine of the faith. I insist, this document of the Dicastery for the Unity of Christians, and what it does is to present what has been talked about in these years. It is true that in this presentation it is said that it is possible that some even want to reinterpret the function of the papacy. Another thing that needs to be clarified is that the person who has guided this document and who has guided the ecumenical dialogue is Cardinal Koch. Cardinal Koch has been at the head of the Dicastery since 2010, so he has been the head of the document for 14 years. He was chosen for this position by Pope Benedict XVI. He is a person very close to theology and spirituality of Benedict XVI. He is considered one of the few remaining conservatives in the Vatican Curia. He was the only cardinal present in the small, select group that accompanied Monsignor Ganswein on December 31st when Mass was celebrated at the Vatican on the first anniversary of Pope Benedict's death. Therefore, if there is anyone who should not be suspected, it is Cardinal Koch. What does this document say? I insist that it is not a doctrinal document, but it is the summary of what was said. What does the document say? It says that there is a kind of consensus, so that the Pope becomes in some way, and not specified in that way, the representative of all Christians, even understood by Christian, who believes in the humanity and divinity of Jesus Christ, because there is also, apart from that, there is everything, and even in that, there is everything. That these dialogues have taken place bilateral dialogues, there is more or less a certain unanimity that the Pope is the representative of all Christians. What does that mean? Well, in the principle that he would be a kind of honorary president, without any powers, a kind of primus inter pares, the first among equals, maybe and most. We're talking about the first millennium of a Christian history. Maybe at most he could have the role of supreme judge, of supreme tribunal of the Church. When there are two theological currents confronting each other and the Pope, both go to the Pope, and the Pope decides this is the Orthodox current, this is the heretical current. At most. But when we talk about the first millennium, I do not know if everybody knows something about the history of the Church, because in the first millennium there is already a schism. Then there was another one, the definitive one, in the second millennium, but in the first millennium there was a schism with the Orthodox Church, so it was not all the bed of roses. That schism of the first millennium was certainly resolved. But in the first millennium, there was the schism with the Jacobites Nestorians, the Syrians. There was the break with the Armenians. There was the break with the Copts in the first millennium, and neither the respective councils, for example the Council of Chalcedon, nor the mediation of the Pope was of any use. Therefore, to state that in the first millennium the Pope was accepted by all as the supreme tribunal of the Church, I insist, it's not to know the reality of what happened. He was accepted by some, and to the extent it was convincing for them. This is in terms of reassignment of the figure of the Pope, with respect to the churches and ecclesial communities as a whole. To be able to accept this theoretical honorary papacy, to be able to accept it, it would be necessary, as the document says, to distinguish three different missions for the figure of the Pope. A first mission, a first task, towards the rest of the churches and ecclesial communities. A second mission as patriarch, it says, of the Western Church, of what we call the Catholic Church. A third mission, the Bishop of Rome, as the Patriarch of the Catholic Church, that is, in the present some sense of papacy, the document says that what was approved in Vatican I could be reinterpreted. We will have to see, I insist, what the doctrine of the faith says about how to reinterpret this, and it could not be reinterpreted in the sense of changing the Pope's authority to the decree, to declare something as a dogma of faith, because even for that, as the document also says, the Pope consults the Bishop of the world. Rather, it would be a reinterpretation of the universal episcopate that the Pope has within the Catholic Church. He is the universal bishop with full jurisdiction, which would be the reinterpretation of a more synodal sense, more of listening, collaboration. We will have to see what it means, for example, in terms of episcopal conferences or appointment of bishops. Who will appointment? Will it be the universal bishop, as it was in the case now, or will there be some other way of appointment? Will the episcopal conference have autonomy, or at least relative autonomy, to change the liturgy, morals, or canon law? In other words, we are faced with the possibility that this reinterpretation of Vatican I will not be directed to the proclamations of dogmas of the faith, but to the modification of what it means to be universal bishop for all the dioceses of the world. Even in the face of this honorary papacy, it is necessary to recognize. It is necessary to come down to reality and recognize what is happening. For example, where this is, and I do not say papacy, but honorary papacy, as it is in the Anglican Church, we see in reality that it is of no use. The Anglicans are in the process of internal rupture that is irreversible. There are many Anglican communities, all of them African, that have separated from Anglicanism to form a new kind of Anglicanism because of the drip that the Church has had. The Anglican Church have had issues on the blessing of gay couples, gay marriages, gay priesthood. Africans, but not only Africans, have said, "This has no place for us, we are leaving." And it has not helped that they have an honorary primate like the Archbishop of Canterbury. With regards to the dialogue of Protestant communities, ecclesiastical communities, Anglican, Lutherans, Calvinists, what we see in these years is that ecumenism is further away than when we began the dialogue with them after Second Vatican Council, because they have begun a drift towards theological liberalism that the Catholic Church, at least until now, has not followed. They have approved abortion, they have approved women priests, they have approved women bishops, they have approved everything that has to do with the LGBT ideology, which has caused them, as I said, an internal rupture in many of these communities, not only the Anglicans, but also the Methodists, for example. They have all accepted this, and they are further away from the Catholic Church than they were 40 years ago. Does this mean that an honorary papacy can be useful? Practical usefulness, I mean, when in these years, without the existence of this papacy, things have gotten worse and worse, and where this honorary primacy exists, as among the Anglicans, this honorary primacy has not served to keep the Church united. Let us look at the Eastern churches, especially the Orthodox. The relationship with the Orthodox is also worse than ever, sometimes for political reasons, the war in Ukraine, but sometimes also for theological reasons. It is Cardinal Koch himself who recently said the approval of fiducia supplicans, with the blessing of the possible blessing of homosexual couples, has broken the bridges of dialogue with the Orthodox and even the Armenians and Copts, with whom a certain understanding has been reached on very sensitive question of the divine nature of Christ. The Armenians and the Copts are monophysites, which means that they believe that there is only one divine nature, because of the human nature, which they also recognize is practically insignificant. They say that it's like a drop of water diluted in the sea. Well, progress was made on these issues, then fiducia supplicans came, and then the Armenians and Copts said they wanted nothing more than with the Catholic Church. Why? Because they accused the Catholic Church of being heretical by approving the blessing of homosexual couples, and thus separating itself from the common teachings of the Church. So that what is the ecumenical situation with one or the other to think that there's any possibility of an honorary papacy could have any practical significance? Indeed, that it could become a supreme body for settling theological disputes? Then, there is the other question. The Pope, as a universal bishop, as a patriarch of the Catholic Church. Well, it can be said that the Pope needs to be more synodal, that he needs to listen more to bishops' conferences and other bodies. That is all well and good, but what is the reality? There are many analysts who believe that bishops are or are becoming more and more like the top managers of a multinational company where the president or CEO can remove them if he does not agree with the management, and give examples of the case of Monsignor Alvarez in Arecibo, in the case of Monsignor Strickland in Tyler, and not only these two examples of the dismissal of bishops without there being juridical reason and trial that said you have committed the sin or you have been neglecting the issue of patricy, but simply dismissal without trial and without any reason that could be considered objective according to canon law. I repeat, there are many analysts who said that bishops in the diocese seem less like successors of the apostles and more like high officials of multinational company who can be dismissed whenever the boss wants. Not only these cases, the bishop have been deprived of important powers, for example, the possibility of approving new institution created in the diocese, an association of the faithful, a religious congregation, that can no longer do that. It will be decided and it will be done, only Rome can do it. Or the possibility, once a discernment has been made and the Vatican has been consulted, to decide if an apparition of the Lord of the Virgin is authentic or if it's a hoax. The possibility of discernment has also taken away from the bishops. They're left with possibility of making preliminary analysis, but the decision now rests in Rome. This is why I insist that according to many analysts, what progress has been made in the recent terms of patriarchal synodality, and in terms of dialogue with episcopal conferences. The episcopal conferences are listened to. They must be listened more, but as long as the Pope who decides who makes up the conference because he appoints the bishops, this listening, this dialogue can be like the dialogue, and it can take place in a parish council, whose members are appointed by the parish priest among his friends. I appoint you and I listen to you, and if you don't tell me what I want to hear, the appointment is over. I think the subject is sufficiently delicate, sufficiently important not to be taken lightly. There is one thing in the document that I like very much. It says that the primacy of the Church is not held by the Pope but by Jesus Christ. He has it. It says it explicitly, the Word of God. That is revelation, but revelation, as the Second Vatican Council also says, revelation is integrated by the Word of God and by tradition. I think we would do very well to give primacy to the Word of God and to tradition and to revelation, and not to do anything that goes against this revelation, because to do anything against it will not promote unity. But as we have already seen in our history, and as we see for example among the Anglicans, it will only contribute to increasing divisions. The primacy in the Church belongs to Christ. Everything else is pure and simple consequence. Until next week, God willing.
We will continue to keep you informed about what is happening in the Church, but during the meantime, you can visit our website www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.